Hello and welcome to the SCS Happy Hour. We're here to talk about the national championship and talk a little bit of NFL playoff football. We're here joined with a new guest. We got Section here. He is a Michigan fan and a ULM fan. So, Section, introduce yourself and we'll get rolling.
Hey guys, what's up? My name's Section. As you can tell, I got my Notre Dame helmet on, my national championship gloves on, and I'm cosplaying as Alex Anzalone with my John Kitna.
The
And if you don't
John
believe me,
Kitna. The John
bro, that's
Kitna is
my
perfect.
QB1. That's my QB1.
Okay.
Okay?
But
Say what you will. Say what you will about the Lions. Jared Goff, yeah, he's Jesus Christ reincarnate, yada yada yada. But last time I checked, he's lost games. Okay, he doesn't have a perfect season. You know who did have a perfect season? John the Goat Kitna.
the, but that was a perfect season the other way, correct?
It was still a perfect season there, bud.
Oh,
And you know we did it so well that Chicago felt left out, so they ran it back in 2016.
it's crazy. Anyways, okay. Okay, so let's talk about the first semifinal. So we had Notre Dame and Penn State, and they were playing in Miami Gardens in the Orange Bowl, and it was a pretty good game. At halftime, the score was 10-3. Penn State was kind of controlling this game, the most of the game, honestly. But a few slip ups later in the game, especially I'm not going to get this name wrong. I said it wrong. Greathouse, Jaden Greathouse. He had 105 yards, a touchdown, and 7 receptions, including a 54-yarder. And I mean, it was the big things that really hurt Penn State, like to make it close, and then a few crucial mistakes right at the very end, including a Drew Allard interception. That's a lot of vowels right there, but a Drew Allard interception it kind of sealed the deal, and then obviously Jeter with a walk-off field goal. So yeah, we'll go to section. Obviously, this is more your territory with a Big Ten versus basically Big Ten or ACC matchup. So what do you think about the
Well,
Orange Bowl with Notre
I got to
Dame and
cut you
Penn
off
State?
right there. I got to cut you off right there. Never call Notre Dame a Big Ten school again. They had their chance 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, and they've made their peace. There is a reason everybody in the Big Ten hates them. Because they are self-centered, self-righteous, and the worst. And thankfully, the miracle under the lights with my Denard Robinson. Uh, Man, scoring 2 touchdowns in 4 seconds never felt so good. But yeah, no, I was a bit worried there when I was watching the game, because in the Big Ten we have a joke about James Franklin and Penn State, specifically James Franklin's Penn State. Uh, so how do you know if they're playing against a good team or not?
How?
Well, if they win, because if Penn State wins a game, they were playing frauds. Because as everybody knows, James Franklin doesn't know how to beat good teams, and that's how I knew that Boise State did not belong in the college football playoffs because James Franklin was able to beat them. And so I was worried that Notre Dame was going to be frauds this year. And I really was on the edge of my seat, and then I remembered it's Drew Aller, so of course things were going to go Notre Dame's way because Notre Dame actually, for the first time in 30 years, has a pulse. I think we as the college football world hate Notre Dame with a burning passion for the sole fact that ever since their last Natty, and I think it was '83 or something, uh, they have consistently been rated very high preseason just to do absolutely nothing with it. They have never won into the postseason since this year in anything that actually matters. And I gotta say, it's kind of magical, but as a Michigan fan, I think this is the worst possible outcome. I have to say it because on one hand, if Penn State won, Ohio State was gonna win it, guaranteed. But it's Penn State, so at least we're keeping it a Big Ten national championship. Um, but because it's Notre Dame, as a Michigan man, I am extremely conflicted. We have two rivals here at Michigan. Ohio State, obviously, greatest rivalry in sports. It's called the game for a reason. It started because of a war. We hate those motherfuckers. You're raised from a very young age, basically from birth, to hate the state of Ohio. Vice versa. They aren't good people. They do things backwards. Just a bad state overall. And then number two is Notre Dame. the two most attended sporting events in American history at stadiums, because NASCAR with their open fields, those have a couple of them, but the two in stadiums, uh, the first one was in 2011. It was Michigan Notre Dame, Miracle Under the Lights. It had 114,956 people, I believe. Number one was in 2013 in the rematch, Michigan Notre Dame at Michigan Stadium with 115,115, I believe. So I hate Notre Dame to the core. They suck. They're pretentious. They're annoying. They're arrogant. And now I have to choose who I want to win the Natty. And it truly pains me and the entire fan base. It's nice knowing that James Franklin won't be vindicated, but he's at a program that can't fire him because they truly have nobody better. Uh, but yeah, no, it was it was an emotional roller coaster the entire way through.
Yeah. And yeah,
Uh,
and
it, it it felt like Michigan TCU in 22,
okay.
where when basically Penn State, if they won that game, it would be like TCU winning against Michigan, because you knew whoever won the Ohio State Georgia game was gonna win the national championship because TCU had made it through. Because they like, yeah, we lost to them. They held us, but Georgia and Ohio State were very clearly better. Same with Ohio State and Texas, to be frank.
Yeah, and I can agree there. There's even more similarities between those two games. I'd brought that up as soon as it happened. I think a lot of people are high on Texas and Ohio State. The betting lines for Notre Dame, they were going to be underdogs to either team, to either Texas or to Ohio State. And then obviously with Ohio State, the opening line, like the night after or whatever, was 7.5, and that's a for a natty opening line, that's crazy. Like over the last 20 years. I know when you look at like the last three, that TCU line I think was like 11.5 when it opened. Um,
Don't remind me.
but yeah, but on the Ohio State side of things, if we can hop over there really quickly, Will Howard, he had a coming of age kind of game, right? He did have the interception fairly early on, but hey,
Well, of course he
he
did.
what?
Of course he did.
Yeah.
You know, there's a joke. There was a joke once we all made once he signed on after they got rid of their last quarterback. I can't even remember his name. Oh yeah, Honda McCord, the
Yeah.
beautiful Honda McCord, now doing great moves at Syracuse. When they signed Will Howard, the universal joke was Will Howard, no he won't, and let me tell you, no he didn't.
Yeah. And yeah, but he had one touchdown, one interception, 289 yards, and I mean, hey, he only got sacked twice. They protected him pretty well, and his weapons at halfback, they were actually pretty solid. Travion Henderson had 117 yards and a touchdown. Quinshaw Junkins finally found the end zone twice. So he had 58 yards and two touchdowns, and then Tate with another 87 yards on top of that. And once you see all these the weapons that Ohio State has around Will Howard, it kind of, and this is why I hadn't talked on Riley Leonard just yet, is that Riley is, I'm not saying he's a one-man show, right? But Riley, he improvises and he's more of the game himself than Will Howard is in Ohio State. I'm not calling Will Howard a system quarterback, but he kind of is when in comparison to Riley Leonard. Because if you're watching the Sugar Bowl, especially, I think the Sugar Bowl, that was a NFL caliber tryout, basically, for Riley Leonard. He was playing one of the best, or at least one of the most talented, depending on, I know Section probably has some opinions on SEC defenses, but defenses in the nation. And he dominated. He did everything right. He didn't make very many mistakes. And I think Riley will still do that. But to Will Howard's point, he only missed 9 throws. He was 24 for 33. Pretty solid completion. Can I get the percentage? No, I can't get the percentage. Apparently that's not there right now. But yeah, but it's a solid game. And on the other side, Quinn Ewers, it wasn't a bad game. Like he was 22 for
Ah,
39. It was less than average. We usually say an average completion percentage is right at 60%. Arch Manning, obviously he had that fumble early in the game, and then they get to the 1 yard line. Now, I don't put this on Quinn. I put this more on Sark because Sark has never been able to like finish these drives inside the 5, inside the 10. He might be the best play caller outside the 15 if you need a touchdown, but inside the 10, he drops drastically. But Jaden Blue, yes, Jaden Blue. I was making sure I was getting that name correct. He also had 2 touchdowns and 75 yards. Matthew Golden had 51 yards in a losing effort. It was a good game, right? Now, this was a game that Ohio State, they were battling for the longest time, and Ohio State pulled away at the very end, obviously, with a Jack Sawyer fumble return, which is why we have Jack Sawyer right there. And then also with a Quinshad Junkins punch in. So it's just one of those things, right? It's sad that it happened to Texas. It was a great year in year one of the SEC. They didn't win the SEC championship and they didn't win the Natty. So this is one of those, like those Nick Saban years where it's regretful that you didn't come back with anything. You didn't come back with an SEC championship. You didn't come back with a national championship. But you can at least say, hey, we won. How many games did they actually won? I think they won 13. You won 13 games, right? 13-3, first year in the SEC. Can't complain about that. But I've been yapping for a while. Section, do you have any opinions on the Ohio State game? Any opinions on Texas or any of that?
Texas lost that game more than Ohio State won it.
Mm.
That is through and through what happened there. Because so you were praising Will Howard. I would 100% say that he's a system quarterback. So where Dylan is it? Yeah, Dylan Leonard.
Riley Leonard.
Riley. Sorry, I'm thinking of Dylan Gabriel. Huh, bad quarterbacks. Riley Leonard. He is a one-man show, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if you have a team to surround him.
Yeah.
Whereas Will Howard isn't the powerhouse at Ohio State as much as his receiving group is, his wide receiving class. And even though they can't beat Michigan, they are truly the stars on that team. So you were seeing, he had a really high. Both of the quarterbacks had a fairly high passing percentage, but in that first half, there is absolutely no reason other than Texas not knowing how to score that it shouldn't have ended 21-7 or 28-7. Texas at the end of that first half, because Ohio State, they scored on their first drive right away. And, everybody in the nation was thinking, oh, God, it's going to be another Ohio State runs away with it game. And then they do what they do when Day gets a little jumpy, he gets a little over anxious, and he doesn't really know how to control his emotions. They start to get ahead of themselves a bit, and they were really shooting themselves on the foot. I think in the first half, they had 5 penalties for 50 yards on offense. On offense alone. And, there is absolutely no reason Texas shouldn't have been able to take advantage of that, because they had them, I think at one point it was 3rd and 30 or something for Ohio State. It was some ridiculous sicko numbers. If you look at what their field position was for the entirety of the first half, they just kept shooting themselves in the foot. And as they kept cutting to Ryan Day, you can see him getting angrier and angrier. And he doesn't do that often.
Yeah.
He doesn't do that often. We have a lot of experience with it. But, rivalry aside, if you look at the Michigan games for the last 4 years, any time that they start to go down, their discipline on their team starts to go down because they get heated. In the game, it's more so because of the rivalry, but it's also because these boys aren't used to losing, which can be a good thing, but it's also a terrible thing, because once things stop going their way, all the discipline goes out. That goes with the players, and that also goes with the coaching staff, with Day. He doesn't work well under pressure.
Yeah.
And so what I was seeing the entire time was, okay, hey, you know what? You didn't do anything there. Come on, Ewers. You guys got another stop. Let's do something here. Come on, you guys got this. And they did nothing with it. And that I think it was what 22 to 33 completion rating he had. I can't remember what the exact stat is. It doesn't really matter. I don't even think that tells the whole story because you can look at that and think, okay, it's not awful. And then you realize most of them were screen passes behind the line of scrimmage that went absolutely nowhere because they were, quite frankly, I saw a lot of parallels of this Texas team to Michigan the entirety of the regular season. Having been to most of the games and watched all of the ones that I wasn't at on TV, one constant with Michigan was whenever we weren't running the ball, we threw the ball behind the line of scrimmage, some quick slants, some quick screens, whatever, and we would go absolutely nowhere with it. And that's all I was seeing from Texas. And Texas has a very capable core. And what made me even crazier was towards the end of the game when Texas actually did start to score. They would either delay it, so their O line was doing good, and then that would leave gaps for some of their men down the field, so they would have a wide open, or they would throw it to the slants because Ohio State was so focused on being blitz heavy that they had no coverage, and then Texas sees what works, and they just decided, hey, I don't want to do this no more, man. So Ohio State didn't win this game as much as Texas lost it. They had every opportunity to run away with it. They had every opportunity to win the game, and even down to that last drive, I don't know what the hell they were doing. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, why are we going backwards? They
Yeah.
lose on the before the fumble? Would they lose 7 yards when they
Yeah, yeah,
were
yeah.
on the 2?
They did.
And that play specifically was driving me crazy because it was a lateral back. It was a quick toss, but if you look back at that play, now I haven't seen the all 22 of it, but if you look back at that play, I have no idea why they didn't just throw it to Ewers. Because if
Hmm.
you looked at it, the entire field shifted left. Ewers was going right. He was wide open, and even if there was a man down there, hey, it at least gets some yardage. Or furthermore, if you're right on the goal line, Archie Manning for Texas this season, other than the blowouts, has had one key thing that makes him very appealing. He doesn't play a lot, but when he does, he's like Alex Orji. He's going to run. He's going to jump head first, give himself a concussion, but he's going to get you a first down.
Yeah.
That's what Archie Manning was for Texas this season. And they used him earlier in the game to do exactly that. And then when the game was on the line and it actually mattered, he just didn't exist. You know what I mean? And I'm starting to wonder what's wrong with Archie Manning? What are his shortcomings that we don't know about? Because Quinn Ewers played awful. He played awful. Now it's not entirely on him, but he played awful in that game. And we've seen Archie Manning play before, and he does good. So, what is his flaw that Texas's coaching staff sees that we don't? Because there is no reason he should have only been in for one play. He's very capable. It's not just the name Manning. We've seen him. He can run. He can throw. He's extremely dynamic. Now, does he have some ball control problems? Sure. Does he fumble it more than he should? Yes, which is worrying. But, you know, those are coachable issues, and especially if you're at the goal line, who cares if he fumbles if he crosses the pylons?
Yeah.
I also do think it did expose Ohio State, which does make me feel a little bit. I'm still uneasy for if Ohio State's going to beat Notre Dame or not, or if Notre Dame's going to be at Ohio State. But in a non-rivalry setting, it did definitely expose Ohio State that what you need to do to shake them up, and Texas did not execute on that. So I think all week Notre Dame needs to work on their pressures. They need to actually cover Travion Henderson instead of trying to tackle him, failing because you go low instead of going high and then leaving the backfield wide open. There's ways you can beat Ohio State, and nobody does it, and I don't know why.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of, especially college football, is just overthinking when you really look at it. Or even when we get into this, and we get the NFL talk here in a minute, it's gonna be like there's several times, especially this go around to the wild card, that people don't know the simple things of like clock management or like playing your matchups or stuff like that. And I think people just overthink it. Like, okay, so we had just watched before starting this, we had just watched the end of the Washington game, right? And that final play, it requires some balls to call, right? Or that final play that got them the first down. Because you're running a counter sweep bootleg. I don't know what we would really call that, but Jaden Daniels going the opposite way, right? And with all of that, like sometimes I think that people just need to be a little bit more aggressive, need to watch the tape a little bit better, and then you can beat, I think, like not just like Ohio State. I think that any team should be able to beat any other team, honestly. Like, and that might just be a crazy thing to say. Like, obviously, that's a very low-hanging fruit. But I feel like sometimes it's easier than we are led on to believe that it is. But yeah, so we'll continue our discussion. This time we're going to go to the Saturday games for the NFL. And we started Saturday watching I believe, yeah, we were watching Saturday on the Chargers Texans. Okay, Texans, I'm not saying that they're wild card merchants, but the Houston Texans are dominant in the wild card. Obviously, I was at that Sanford game, more to come on that in the week, and we were just watching it on our phones and stuff, and the Texans were dominant in that game. Harbaugh had a welcome to the NFL moment, or at least a welcome to the playoffs in the NFL moment.
Well,
Um, look, hey,
s-
it's a 20-point loss. Come on, come
okay,
on.
no, I get that, but I think framing it as welcome to the NFL or welcome to the playoffs, that's kind of ignoring the fact that he has the highest winning percentage of any active head coach right now, and he's been to the Super Bowl before.
Okay, yes, I understand. Anyways, but CJ Stroud, he did have a great game. We do have him in the graphic as well. And fellow Ohio State alum, much to the chagrin of Mr. Section here, he did have one
Hey, he's one.
interception, as all CJ Stroud games are. But former Oregon quarterback Justin Herbert threw four, and you cannot throw four interceptions and win. Some people cannot throw four interceptions and win. Shout out Trevor Lawrence. But it was a nightmare game from the Chargers. I don't think that they want to revisit this at any point anytime soon. Um, but yeah, but it was a very interesting game, and I'll go in on the Steelers Ravens real quick too, just so we can kind of get the whole day out of the way. Steelers Ravens, look, the Ravens, they're kind in the AFC wise, they're almost my pick. They put 464 yards of total offense up. Derrick Henry and the Texans put 429, but Derrick Henry had a hell of a game, 186 yards. Lamar Jackson had 175 through the air, 81 on the ground. It was, and I mean, those two, there was only one other player, Isaiah Likely, had 53 yards. Not a single other player on their team had more than 50. So it was a interesting game, and I will say, hey, Russell Wilson, I've given you a lot of crap on my account, right? But you had a decent game. You had a solid game. You controlled the game. You didn't let it get too out of hand. And really, it wasn't until the like deep into the third that it was really an issue. And y'all are still battling back, but it was kind of the fourth. No fireworks happened in the fourth, and the Steelers eventually lost. And here's a padlock stat, as Josh Pate would call it. You cannot win a ball game if your opponent in a 60-minute game has the ball for 39 minutes and 33 seconds. So yeah. So section, what were your thoughts on the Texans game, and what were your thoughts on the Charge Steelers Ravens game?
Well, two things. One, I hate the dirty bubble. Um, the Nickelodeon
Yeah,
broadcast
it
was
sucks.
fantastic. Um, and two, unfortunately, when it comes to the NFL, there's a saying that constantly rings true. Harbaugh does what Harbaugh doesn't.
Mm,
Um, because Jim, he is an extremely wildly successful NFL head coach, but unlike his brother, he just doesn't have the same success where it matters. You know
mm.
what I mean? John Harbaugh is an absolute beast. Was I expecting it to be this big of a belt to ass game, because don't let that final score fool you. Don't look at that 28-14 and think for a second that the Steelers had any chance. That
Yeah.
first half was definitional belt to ass. Like, it was insane. I didn't even know if the Steelers were showing up. Maybe they forgot they had a divisional, or that they had a wild card that day. What happened? I don't know. But John Harbaugh scares me. And I think he is, as a Lions fan, John Harbaugh is the only head coach out there right now that really scares me. And it is the worst possible outcome for a Super Bowl as a Lions fan.
Yeah.
That all said, the Texans winning, it sucks.
Yeah.
I'm glad CJ finally gets to experience a win against Michigan, even if it's only by proxy. But I'm not really worried about them. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, yeah, the Chargers played awful, but I'd say it was uncharacteristically awful. And, just like with Texas, I think the Chargers lost this more than the Texans won it, if that makes sense. It was just sloppy. It was sloppy all around for the Chargers. They weren't playing their best. And I don't really think it says anything about the Texans. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
as much as I love the Lions, I don't look at the Lions Colts game, which was like 42-9, if I remember correctly, or 42-7, something ridiculous like that. I don't look at that and think, wow, the Lions are amazing. I do, but I take that more as, wow, the Colts kind of suck. You know?
Yeah. For sure.
If that analogy makes any sense, because the Lions we already know are a good team. And so of course they were going to win, but they exposed the Colts. But you could have put almost any other team that is in divisionals right now up against the Colts, and the score most likely would have been similar. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
it's the same with the Chargers. They're just not as good as they need to be this year. The Texans have every chance to prove me wrong, though. They could be more of a threat than everybody thinks they are, but I don't think anybody walked away from that game thinking, "Oh shit, here come your future Super Bowl champions, the Houston Texans." You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think one thing too with that is that the Texans in general, you can't bet on them, right? Like they're up and down, especially and all revolves around CJ Stroud and the defense overall. Because the defense overall, they can lock down the best team in the league, and then they can have another week where okay. They're okay, right?
Right.
We kind of figured that out whenever the Jags went on their run last year. They beat the Texans at home, and that was kind of like that kind of I think was a moment for the Texans last year. We're like, okay, we got to lock it up, right? Like we gotta change some stuff around. I think that this year the Texans are a little bit better, which like whenever we get to the Bucks, I was not very high on the Bucks. I know he was really high because like they are not really, but they had won their division, at least higher than normal, I guess. But yeah, but that's all for the Saturday games. We will see. Let me remind myself real quick. Has Real already updated it? What's the
Okay,
who
so how it's going to work, at least in the NFC, is well,
pulling it up?
the
We
Lions are
got
going
it.
to play. Yep, yep,
Okay. So we
yeah.
got
So
Buffalo hosting Baltimore, and we got Kansas City hosting Houston. We'll talk about the NFC side whenever we get through this next portion. But yeah,
fair
so
enough.
in general, we'll see those teams next week, and we'll probably end up talking about them
What's
as
the
well.
AFC side again? I apologize.
NFC side?
Uh, the AFC side. So it's going to
AFC
be
side is yeah,
Baltimore,
KC.
Buffalo, Kansas City, Houston. Okay, so what I
Yeah,
take away from that, I think the game to watch, um, I think the most exciting one to watch is undoubtedly going to be Baltimore, Buffalo. They are both extremely fun teams to watch. They are both extremely well-oiled machines. Um, Buffalo Buffalo is either fantastic or once in a blue moon they suck. And I don't think that this team is going to suck against
Yeah,
Baltimore. But I think, unlike almost anybody else that Buffalo has played this year, I don't think the Ravens are scared.
for sure.
It is going to be a bloodbath, and I'm extremely excited to watch that.
Hey,
Houston's
and
playing Kansas City. Oh, sorry.
as we go to Sunday, because that was the Buffalo game, honestly,
Oh,
okay, least impressive 24-point win I've ever seen. I know that might sound crazy, but for the first quarter and a half, it was kind of a battle. And I know that might sound crazy, right? It might sound crazy that for the first quarter and a half it was a battle, but I mean, because okay, they did not tie the game until right into the second quarter, right? They did not take a lead, or they also took the lead at that moment, right? But then
yeah.
they went into halftime, or wait, into halftime or right after halftime? Right after halftime, it was still a 10-3 or 10-7 game, right? And obviously they had an impressive second half, but you got to have 4 quarters of football to win in the NFL, right? And the one thing that I think that Buffalo struggled with, especially against Kansas City, and obviously, they're not playing Kansas City this week, but they might play them next week with how Houston's playing currently. But if they want to get past Baltimore at the very least, if they want to get past that potent rushing attack, they're going to have a better game. And I mean, yes, did they have a good game? Yes, they dominated time possession, like I said earlier. But it happened, it more showed late. It happened early, but it showed late. You know what I'm saying? So overall, obviously, Buffalo had a good game, right? They put up 471 yards of offense. Josh Allen made no mistakes, but it's just, I need to see a little bit more, right? My favorite thing that happened midway through the second quarter was when they really started to run the ball. When they really started to run the ball and press the issue, they were fine. But when they were trying to play catch up with Denver really early on, it was not working. And if you try to do that with Kansas City, they're gonna bite you with it. But yeah, and on the Denver side, Bo Nix, you're so close to being my offensive rookie of the year, but I'm assuming that it's going to be Jaden Daniels at this point. But a hell of a rookie campaign. So many people have had written Bo Nix off early, had written Sean Payton and the Broncos off. They end up making the playoffs at the final week, because the Bengals kind of sucked the first 7 weeks of the year, and they were one of the best teams, or one of the most fun teams to watch the whole season, right? And in a losing effort, Cortland Sutton is the best weapon, 75 yards, right? And also shout out to James Cook, 120 yards and a touchdown, and also Ty Johnson, 70 yards and a touchdown. So normal game for the Bills. And yeah, I'll keep going. I'll keep pushing to the Eagles. Yeah, Eagles and Packers matchup. You probably enjoyed the hell out of this game. The Eagles never let their foot off the gas until like right before the third, but then they still smacked them right before like right before that ended. So in the third quarter, let me find which actual play was that. Yeah, so they did give up a touchdown and a field goal. But in between those, they had a Jahan Dotson, or wait, no, the Dotson touchdown was early. Which one was later? Okay, yes, so Josh Jacobs scored late into the fourth quarter, and then they ended up scoring another touchdown and icing the game, right? So it's one of those things where the Packers, you got to score early, right? You can't have this kind of game where you're having this. I just told my dad tonight. Anyways, but you can't have this game where you're kind of, you're playing with emotions with a team like the Eagles, and the Eagles will play the which one are they playing?
I believe they're playing Minnesota.
They're playing Minnesota. This bracket is not filled out. Screw Pro Football
Yeah,
Network.
yeah, no, they're playing Minnesota because how
Yes.
in both the NFC and the AFC, the one seed plays the lowest seed that wins the wild card.
Yeah, because they reseed, which is something that the college football really wants to do in the
Hmm.
future.
And, and
Um,
and you were saying that you thought that I loved this game, um, and I did not.
oh,
I hated this game, but not for the reason that you think. So the Packers, they are in the NFC North. The NFC North, except for the Bears, was absolutely fantastic this year. It was the single best division in the NFL, bar none. Um, and you'd think that I would enjoy watching the Packers go down. That is the rational response, except for the fact that we are in the playoffs. And I guess the easiest way that I could put it is I would rather grate cheese again than commit a felony by shooting down a bald eagle. And because at the time, what was really worrying here is the implications of this game were if the Packers won, the Lions would be playing the Packers because they were the 7th seed. And the Vikings had the Vikings had already won, so we were up on deck to play the Vikings, and the Packers had a chance, to
Yeah.
beat the Eagles, do the unthinkable, and then we would play the Packers. So, as much as I hate to say it, I was chanting "Go Pack Go," not because I like them, but because I don't want to play. I didn't want to play the Eagles. You know what I mean? I didn't want to play the Vikings. We've beaten the Vikings twice this year, but we haven't had a bye week since the 4th week or something like that. Like the Lions, one of the reasons why the Lions were both the most fun team to watch this year, arguably, if you were looking competitively fun, because the Broncos were also fun, but for different reasons. One of the reasons why watching the Lions this year was so fun and so entertaining, it doesn't matter where you were, who your alliances were, is because not only did they defy all the odds to get back here, but because their bye weeks were so early in the season that I think for the past 8 or 9 weeks they haven't had any time off, and the Lions have the most defensive players on the IL. I think right now it's sitting at 22 or 24. That's half of their defense is gone. Key players too. This man right here, Alex Anzalone, he just came back.
Yeah.
That is our first core pillar of our defense who has come back. But we have lost so many men. Aiden Hutchinson went out extremely early in the year, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but even though he only played 3 games before breaking his leg, he still has the highest defensive player rating in the NFL with a minimum of 250 snaps at I think it's 95.6. So
I
he
have
didn't.
no clue.
I can't remember what the exact stat is, but I know it's 95 points something. But if I think this would be a completely different conversation and a completely different picture if Aiden Hutchinson alone didn't break his leg. But with Green Bay losing, the Eagles go on, so the Eagles are going to be playing the Ravens, or not the Ravens. The Eagles are going to be playing the Vikings, and the reason that the Eagles are playing the Vikings and not us is because of this next game that we just watched.
Yeah. Look, he's already learning it. He's already learning it. So, the next
I
game
worked in
that we
radio
watched
for
was the
3 years, man.
Washington-Tampa Bay game. And this game, honestly, this was the most competitive. Can we say most competitive? Let me go back.
Yes.
Yeah, by far, most competitive game of the season. And I think we all knew this kind of going in as well. I don't think this was a shock that it was very competitive. But yeah, but the fact that it was competitive, it's a great thing. Great thing for the two franchises that we have here. I almost said programs. I'm so locked into college football right now. But yeah, but this was a Jaden Daniels versus Baker Mayfield matchup. Probably the two feel-good stories that you could really have with this NFL season, honestly. And like I said before, Bo Nix being another one that's currently in the playoff. And I mean, Jared Goff, honestly, as well as one of those. So this was a weird game. You can't really have a real padlock stat here looking at it. It's pretty split down the middle in yards, possession, first downs. The team that actually led time possession did win the game, but they only led it by 11 minutes, which in all reality is not that much. But the biggest thing here was that Washington made plays when it mattered. So let's take a little rewind. So when it was 10-10 at the start of halftime, or yes, because of a Mike Evans touchdown right before halftime. 10-10. The Zane Gonzalez field goal. Okay, up 3, right? Bucky Irving touchdown. Shout out Bucky. And then there was a Terry McLaurin touchdown. Shout out Terry. But then after that, it was 20-20. 4 minutes to go in the game. And I mean, what are we thinking? 4-minute offense. Buccaneers need to go out there and stop them. And honestly, like I'm not saying that the Bucks played bad defense here because I don't think that they did, but they just couldn't stop. It was just like I think they ran. How many plays did they end up running on that drive? Um, I will sit here and count. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, and the 10th play of the drive was the field goal. A 10-play drive to work off 4 minutes of the clock. And it won't tell me exactly if were they calling timeouts? Yeah, they're calling timeouts for sure. Yeah. So, 10 plays, you burned through all your timeouts. It was a masterclass. Now, I will say this though, is that earlier in the game, both coaches kind of made some missteps, and we'll probably talk about that in the later part of the week episode when I can get some videos up and some graphics up. Um, but yeah, but overall, it was a great game. This is kind of what you have the playoffs for, right? This is what we all remember as a kid, watching these like bloodbaths well, bloodbath in football usually means blowout, but you know what I'm saying? Just like this fisticuffs, battle to the end. And hey, it was a great game. But yeah, Mr. Section, were your thoughts about this game, and what were your thoughts about some other things moving forward?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't really pay too much attention to this game, as much as I would have if I would have known that Green Bay was gonna lose like they did. And I haven't really paid attention to either of these teams. So I was kind of going in blind. It's infinitely closer than I thought that it would be. Um, and I still don't know how to feel about it because it was a great game of football. It was a fantastic game of football. It was extremely close. Um, it was it was in the trenches, but I didn't because it was so close and because it was so tight. I don't I don't really know what to come away with it,
Mm,
if that makes sense. It came down to a field goal. It came
yeah.
down to a doink to division, right? Um, but both teams had their strengths, both teams had their weaknesses. I think it kind of evens out. Yeah, the Commanders won, but they very easily could have sent it into overtime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't really know what implications to take out of this compared to the rest of the field,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
for sure. And I think overall, I think the Commanders, they have to win in the playoffs, you either need a team that can play for 4 quarters, like 100%, or the best team possible in in a format of a couple minutes, right? And I think that the Commanders, they can put a couple drives together that get some touchdowns. So if they play like a more ball dominant team like the Lions or like somebody else, they might have a better shot, right, than a team that just plays somebody straight up. Because I don't think this is way more of a college team. I know that might sound crazy, but it's definitely more of a college team where the types of plays that they're running, the types of concepts they're running. I'm not saying that they're running bad concepts. I'm just saying like they're running concepts that you would see more at a college or a high school, right? So yeah, so overall, pretty solid, but for me, it's just like yeah, I don't know exactly either. But going back to this playoff bracket.
I
Okay, so we
actually
got
lied when I said that the Eagles were playing the Vikings,
yeah.
and the reason that that's empty is because I completely forgot. I think that the Eagles will be playing the Vikings, but that game I believe was supposed to have already happened, but because of the wildfires, it got pushed to tomorrow. It's going to be in Arizona now. So that game, the Minnesota Rams game, hasn't happened yet.
Okay. I totally forgot that as well. Is that literally happening tomorrow night?
Yes, it is happening tomorrow night.
Oh, shout
Um,
out. Look, that's going to be a beautiful birthday gift. Shout out NFL. I'm sorry that LA's currently burning, but
Funnily enough, the same insurance company that canceled all the policies is the sponsor of the stadium they're going to.
oh my Lord, don't
Um,
mention that. Anyways, but yeah, so we'll be tuned into that, and the winner of that game will play the Eagles. Honestly, with how this has gone, I'm not sure if either of those can really battle against the Eagles, but we'll see,
well,
or we'll try to see.
here's what I'll say. if you look at this seeding, and then putting either of them up against the Eagles, I mean, if you just look at the actual seeding, it should seem obvious that the Eagles are going to win. But may I remind you, the Minnesota Vikings are, I believe, the first 5 seed going into a wild card that has gone 14-3 in the regular season.
Yeah.
The only reason that the Vikings are number 5 in the NFC is because the Lions beat them, and it
Yeah.
would be vice versa. These are two of arguably the most dominant teams in the NFL. And they just happen to be rivals, right?
Yeah.
Kansas City, of course, whatever. Buffalo, they've shown their weaknesses, whatever. But I don't think that you should write out the Vikings against the Eagles. I think that will be I think that'll be good, a BTA game. They have to
Good
get past the
BTA.
Rams, of course, which we won't find out until tomorrow.
Yeah.
I have no doubts in my mind that the Vikings are going to demolish the Rams, though. Because again, even though the Rams are seated higher, and even though you can be as delusional as you want in LA, the Vikings have only lost 3 games, and those losses, 2 of them were to the Lions.
Yeah.
Right. Which I really don't know what to say about that. The Rams are really gonna have to play their very best football possible to have a chance to lose to the Eagles.
Yeah. And I do think that the Vikings are a better matchup, but I think that the Rams are also a bad matchup for the Vikings, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because I think that like having Puka, Stafford's been playing out of his mind too, past like 6 weeks of the season. Um, but yeah, so that'll be a matchup. When we apologize if we did mention the Vikings earlier in the show, um, we kind of just totally blanked on that. But yeah, so looking forward, outside of that matchup, which we kind of just talked about both hypotheticals anyway. So if you're watching this in the week, you got that information anyway. Kansas City, Houston, that's a bad matchup for Houston at least. Kansas City is a well-oiled machine. And I think they're just waiting on whoever comes out of this Baltimore Buffalo game. Baltimore Buffalo, I honestly think Baltimore's coming out of that one, if I had to guess. Buffalo's been so up and down. The only like it's been so long since they beat Kansas City at home. I know that they're holding their hat on that and everything. Detroit, Washington, I think this is a closer game. I think Washington might cover the spread because I've seen the spread's only like 10 points on this game. But I think Detroit comes out with a victory here. And obviously, as we just said, I do believe that Philadelphia, they will also come out with a victory against whoever they play. So, on to you.
Yeah. Well, with Detroit, Washington, I will also say I think it's going to be a close game. Biggest reason being, half of Detroit's defense is injured. And yet they've still gotten this far. I have no idea how. It has been a very stressful season as a Lions fan, but we keep finding a way. That said, in Michigan, you never count your wins before you have them. And especially with these Lions, this is going to be their chance to win their second playoff game, or their third playoff game in 30 years, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so like I'm not anticipating like it's a surefire win. I think Detroit's going to win, but I think it's going to be close, and it's going to be uncomfortably close. And in the end, Detroit's going to do what Detroit does and win in a stupid way. So I got Detroit there. I just for devil's advocate, I'm going to say Buffalo wins against
Hmm.
Baltimore. But like I said earlier, I think it could go either way. I think this is going to be the most exciting game out of any of them because I genuinely don't know who's going to win. Buffalo plays bully ball and Baltimore plays established success ball, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So It's just going to be a battle of the wits. And then Houston, Kansas City. Houston's losing, but I think it would be really funny if they won. So I'm going to have Houston. We need some kind of an upset, and so far we haven't had that. You know what I mean? At least
Yeah,
not
for
by
sure.
the numbers. Like Houston beating LA, of course, that by all accounts was an upset. However, like I said, that's more on the Chargers than it is on Houston. So I got Houston beating Kansas City. Sorry, Taylor Swift. And then depending on the outcome of tomorrow's game, if the Rams win, Philadelphia wins, and I think if Minnesota wins, Minnesota wins.
For sure. And yeah, I'm kind of right there with you with everything. But yeah. And do you have any closing thoughts before we move on?
Um, this next week is going to both be extremely fun and extremely stressful because there are two games that have very, very important uh uh consequences for Michigan and for the Midwest. Well, I guess three with the Vikings game. Uh, and it's going to be both an extremely fun week of football and also extremely stressful. The Lions, I mean, they're America's team, I would argue. Now, granted, they don't have the same charm that they did last year,
Mm,
which does kind of suck, but hey, one pride, we don't care. A team that doesn't care about the or a city that doesn't care about the odds has a team to match. Um, so that's gonna be exciting. I'm rooting for the Vikings. Skull, as we were chanting at the end of that game,
yeah.
and I hate that I'm wearing it, but God, I hope Notre Dame can pull out a win.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say my picks as well. I really hope that Notre Dame wins. I'm a big Riley Leonard guy. Shout out Fairhope. I think that he's going to have the ability to really prove to a lot of, well, I don't want to call them haters necessarily, but a lot of doubters that, hey, he's here to stay, right? Obviously, he's heading to the Senior Bowl in a couple weeks, and I think that with that talent that they have at Notre Dame, especially on defense, with Marcus Freeman, if Riley Leonard can leave, I would say give me two touchdown drives and then one other scoring drive, and I think you're good. I think you're good.
Uh,
Um, I, because think about the last time that they played Ohio State, it came down to a fourth and goal or whatever. So if they can get ahead of the six on some of that, I think it would be fine. You wanted
uh,
to say something like that?
I think you need a bit more security against this Ohio State team. I don't think you can score 21 and get a win. Um, that said, I think what's more crucial for a win for Notre Dame isn't necessarily how much you score as much as how much you can make Ohio State mess up. Because again, Ohio State under Ryan Day has only lost 10 games,
Mm,
right? Um, four of them, but the big key factor to all of these games that Ohio State lost is you need to make them make mistakes. And the best way to make them make mistakes is to put pressure on them. Either by doing what Georgia or Oregon did and make it come to down to a last play or make them rely on their kicker. Ohio State's kicker, I don't even know his name, and neither do they because he's let them down. All of them have actually in the past, God knows how long. Ohio State doesn't know how to get good field goal kickers.
yeah,
So if you can get them down to a field goal that's 35 yards or more out, your
yeah,
chances of winning are infinitely higher. That's one way. But, a really big thing is you need to put pressure on them. You either need to put pressure on them at the end of the game, or, like you said, you need to take a lead. You need to take a commanding lead, and you need to do it in a way that not only puts you ahead, but puts Ohio State behind. And what I mean by that is make them look bad. Make the you can score those two touchdowns in any way that you want, but the only way that it's going to be impactful against this Ohio State team is if you do it in a way that embarrasses them. Because
mm,
anybody can have an 8-minute drive where it's in the trenches, you're slowly making progression forward, and yeah, it does rattle up their defense, but they can always default to, well, Notre Dame has a good offense. No, if you really really want to secure a win, make them make mistakes, and get them angry, and take them away from that Ohio State ball, you need to score quick. You need to have big plays. You need to
Yeah.
have breakaway plays. You need to make their defenders look like they don't know what they're doing. You know what
Mm.
I mean? It has to be something that rattles them, because if you don't mentally rattle Ohio State, they are going to come back and they're going to win. Their only crack is psychological warfare. And unfortunately, no one's really able to do that, either because they don't have the skill, um, or because they're not mentally ready to do what they need to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say my closing part as well because I didn't talk about the NFL. So my
Oh, sorry.
picks. I won't pick the undecided matchup yet, but I'll take Detroit. I'll take Kansas City. I'll take Baltimore. For obvious reasons on the two favorites there, and then Baltimore. I'm just saying like I don't believe I'm not a what they would call a Buffalo believer, I guess, right? Um, so yeah, just one of those things, I guess, right? But yeah, but anyway, so that's it for the SCS happy hour. We hope that you have a great Monday. And from me, Scout and Section over here, as you see in his helmet, I hope y'all have a great day.